Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. We made it through week 15, or at least hopefully you guys did. I had some really real nail biters, but made it through my two biggest money leagues and my home league here. So on to the semifinals in actually 5 leagues this year. So 5 of my 8 leagues, I'm in the semifinals. That's awesome. Really stoked about that. Hopefully you guys have done really well. Hopefully you guys made it through as well. We got a lot to talk about here. There's a lot of really important waiver ads to go through this week, and obviously it's go time. We want to make sure we're optimizing our rosters for the next several weeks, and it's at the point in time where there's actually a lot going on right now. Had a lot of injuries to running backs that they really opened up the door for a lot of potential guys being added straight off the waiver wire and into people's starting lineups. So that's obviously huge this time of year. Some wide receivers to talk about as well. Not so much at the quarterback position, although I know a lot of you guys will be looking to stream that spot. Tight end becoming a wasteland there. We got to talk about that, and we'll go over some defenses as well. So if you guys have any specific ad drop questions, anything else, any advice you want, I'm here. So just let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to give you guys my advice. And yeah, let's just get into it. It's going to be a fun week. Starting things off with the quarterback position, I think my favorite ad would probably be Aaron Rodgers. And I know it's really scary. Obviously, Rodgers has not been fantastic so far this season, but over the last couple of weeks, we've actually seen his passing yardage numbers go up, and a lot of that's been the Jets defense is playing a horrible, horrible football right now, so they're really giving it up to anybody they play against. That's forcing Aaron Rodgers in this offense to have to put their foot on the pedal. And they play the Rams this week. I know the Rams game last week in general sort of let a lot of people down. That game in San Francisco really resulted in just a low-scoring slugfest. Was not the sort of fun, high-scoring matchup we were hoping it would be. But just go back 2 weeks, they had the second highest scoring game of the year against the Buffalo Bills. There's a lot of opportunity there for the Rams to find themselves in shootouts, and neither one of these defenses are really playing very well right now. So I feel pretty good about this game potentially hitting the over. I feel good about this offense. Breece Hall has not been good. They can't run the ball very effectively. Braylon Allen left the game early with an injury. They're going to have to throw the ball. Devontae Adams is playing fantastic. I think if you need to stream Aaron Rodgers, you could do a lot worse. Drake May, also a really horrifying option, but the matchup's pretty good, or at least interesting here against Buffalo. Keep an eye on the weather. That game is in Buffalo, so if we got a snowstorm or whatever, we obviously don't want to play Drake May there. But Buffalo's going to score a ton of points. You know Drake May is going to be playing from behind. It's going to result in him having to air it out. He's mobile enough. You could do worse than Drake May, although I do think you have better options. I just had to highlight him as a potential like deeper league option. Maybe you're stuck in a 16-team league and need to find somebody. And then Matthew Stafford, opposite Aaron Rodgers. Again, a possible shootout in that game, so I think he's a streaming option if you need him. Probably highly available. I didn't talk about him here either, but if you're really, really desperate down in the weeds, not even the worst option, but Cooper Rush. They play the Buccaneers this week. Threw 3 touchdowns this last week. I think you could do worse than Cooper Rush this week, although you're going to get 0 rushing production. You're going to need that 2 or 3 passing touchdown game for him to be okay, but I think it could happen, and it could be a high-scoring game against Tampa Bay next week. Now this is the big one here. The running back position had a lot of news coming out of this week. Just sort of going to go no particular order here, but Jerome Ford's really high priority ad right now. Probably was rostered already because he had a role, but we saw Nick Chubb break his foot. Really sucks for Nick Chubb. Hoping he can come back next season, but it's getting tough for him. He's an older guy coming off of another major injury. It really sucks seeing Nick Chubb go down there, but as long as he's out, Jerome Ford's going to be the clear running back one in Cleveland. He's obviously an explosive player. We saw him actually put up a really good game this last week, had a 62-yard touchdown. He's an explosive player. They play the Bengals next week. That's a fantastic matchup. Still TBD in terms of who's going to play at quarterback. I obviously love this Browns offense a lot more if Jameis Winston is suiting up, even though Winston's going to turn the ball over a ton, but it just elevates the ceiling for all those guys for sure. So I think Jerome Ford's going to be you can play as a pretty comfortable running back too, and there's a lot more upside if Jameis Winston is available. So he should not be on any waiver wires after this week. Kendra Miller, also a really high priority ad. Probably should have been added last week as well, but Kamara left this game early with what I believe was a hamstring injury. It might have been a groin. Don't quote me on that. But the fact of the matter is he left in the third quarter and did not come back. I will not be surprised at all if he misses this upcoming game as well against the Packers. And Kendra Miller is a player that's looked good so far. Not a whole lot of upside in the offense in general, just because they're playing with a backup quarterback, either Jay Kaner or Spencer Rattler. Probably going to be Spencer Rattler next week. Maybe they get Chris Olave back, although I wouldn't expect it. Point being here, though, Kendra Miller could get all the work for this offense. He's a young, explosive player. Anybody getting that kind of volume is certainly worth at least considering in your fantasy lineup. Tajay Spears, he's a big one here. I think he'd be my favorite of the three. If we at least knew that Tony Pollard was going to miss time. We saw Spears put up a monster performances last week. A lot of performance in garbage time, obviously. But he's a guy that can catch a ton of passes. He's a really great pass catcher, explosive player, does a lot every time he touches the ball, and Pollard's banged up. We could Pollard leave the game early with an injury. We could see Pollard miss a game upcoming here. Tough to know. Pollard's got some contract incentives. I know he's going to want to make sure he gets over 1,000 yards. He wants to get 2 more touchdowns for some contract incentives as well. So Pollard's going to try to find his way on the field, I'm sure, but I think Spears is a good enough player that he needs to be added regardless, and if Pollard misses time, Spears is a guy that I feel really good about getting in my lineup. Kamani Vidal, gotta mention him, played 67% of the snaps compared to just 27% for Edwards. So Vidal's a starter in LA. I know this Chargers offense was horrendous this last week. They do play a tough Broncos defense next week as well. But Vidal's a guy that if you're really desperate, you could consider playing. Just view him as the starting running back for the Chargers right now, although we don't know really how valuable that role is. Ty Johnson, just wanted to mention him and Ray Davis really, but Ty Johnson's basically got the pass catching role in this Bills offense. There's a lot of passing volume to go around, a lot of passing yardage to go around in this offense. And Ty Johnson's a good player. He's playing really well. If you're desperate, if you're in a deep league PPR format, I think Ty Johnson's a guy you could just throw in there as your RB2 or low end flex play. And there's upside just by him being associated with this Bills offense. And then beyond that, it's just the handcuffs every week. So you got Charbonnet, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, those kinds of guys. You got Emmanuel Wilson. Just those kinds of players, any sort of handcuff, Tyler Algier, these are the guys that you want to roster, and just in case something happens to guys ahead of them, because then you see like guys with Jerome Ford, Kendrick Miller, Tajay Spears, all these guys are going to be high priority ads next week if something happens to the starter, and if you get ahead of it, you're guaranteed to have them for your roster spot next week. Obviously, though, we want to optimize for guys that we're sure we're going to start, so like it's okay if there's a defense you want to add, go ahead that defense, lock in that defense for next week or something. We want guys that we're going to be playing in our lineups, like if you're adding the handcuff, you need the starter to get hurt this week for it to matter, but they just got to be mentioned as well. They're guys that you can certainly consider rostering one more week. Moving on to the wide receiver position here, we've got Romeo Doubs headlining. They got a Saints matchup next week that does not scare me at all. You're a little bit touchdown dependent with Romeo Doubs, but the fact of the matter is he's a reliable, integral part of a good offense, and it's tough to find that on waiver wires pretty often. So Doubs potentially got dropped to waiver wires just with the concussions he was dealing with. He's a good player. I don't know who the wide receiver one is in Green Bay, to be entirely honest. You could call it Doubs, you could call it Watson, you could call it Jaden Reed. The point is, all three of them are like flex plays, basically. So if you need a flex play, if you're in a deeper league, Romeo Doubs is certainly someone you can consider starting. Jalen McMillan still feels really risky, but he's the clear wide receiver 2 in a good offense for the Buccaneers. The Cowboys are the matchup in Week 16. That does not scare me at all. They've been giving it up through the air pretty effectively, even though they have been playing better in general. But Cade Otton sort of faces his way out of the offense. It's basically Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan right now, outside of the running backs out of the backfield. So I think Jalen McMillan is like a deeper league flex play. Kind of boom or bust. I won't be shocked if he goes out there and gives you a goose next week. But he's also been playing really well. He's got 40 PPR fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. That's more than he had on the entire season before that. So, it's really been a spike 2 weeks here for McMillan. But we see that with rookies towards the end of the season. So I don't just want to hand wave that. He's certainly someone we need to look at. Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette left the game with a groin injury, so Coker's the wide receiver 2 here. I think he's actually maybe a better player than Legette as well. Just seems more consistent, seems to be in the right place at the right time. I like him. He's a good player. Thielen's still the wide receiver 1 here in Carolina, but against the Cardinals this next week, you could do a lot worse than playing Coker if you really needed to. Cedric Tillman, it's a tough one because we don't really know what the status of Jameis Winston and this Browns offense is going to be. But if Cedric Tillman comes back, which I'm expecting to happen this week, they get to play Cincinnati this next week, which could easily be a really high-scoring game if we get Winston out there. This Bengals defense is not good at all. I'd feel pretty good about playing Cedric Tillman as a solid flex option if Jameis Winston plays and Tillman is back in your lineup. And then Rashad Bateman, he's a good player. You need the big play or the touchdown for him to come through, but the Steelers defense got a little bit exposed last week against the Eagles. They might be missing TJ Watt this next week as well, so you could certainly see Rashad Bateman put up a good game, although Lamar does historically struggle quite a bit against the Steelers, so tough to guarantee that, but I think Bateman's a guy that you could certainly flex or do worse than if you needed to play him. Tight end was tough this week. I couldn't really come up with a lot of good names for you guys, but I want to highlight Brenton Strange for starters. He had 11 targets this last week. The Jaguars' defense is horrendous. They give up a lot of points. They have to air it out right now. And Mac Jones actually played okay last week. Brenton Strange was kind of the clear number 2 target in the offense. And I know he's a second-year tight end. I don't want to just completely dismiss him. Like, he was a second-round draft pick last year. The Jaguars clearly drafted him to be good. He's a good enough player. I think you could certainly do a lot worse than him, especially as if you're super desperate. I know it feels strange to play Strange in your fantasy lineup, but he's a guy that's getting a lot of volume in full PPR. I would feel okay about considering starting him in what's not necessarily a bad matchup next week. Stone Smart, I know it's gross as well, but he gets to play the Broncos on Thursday. If you're going to beat the Broncos, it's generally with the tight end position. He's an athletic player. Was involved enough this last week. Didn't do great, but he could have done a lot worse as well. It's scary playing guys on Thursday, but there's also a little bit of a benefit in terms of you have a little bit more information going into later on in the week. You get to know how many points you need. You get to know if you're a favorite or an underdog. So Stone Smart's somebody that I think you could at least consider playing if you're really desperate at the tight end spot. I hope you can do better, but you could certainly do worse as well. And lastly here, we got a lot of defenses to highlight, so I'll start things off with the Texans. They get to play the Chiefs this next week. The Texans currently lead the NFL in sacks. They play what's probably going to be a Carson Wentz-led offense. Not that the Chiefs' offense has been very good anyway. The Chiefs are going to play it close to the vest. They'll play smart. They're not going to be a team that's going to go out there and throw 3 or 4 interceptions or anything like that. But the Texans are a good defense. I feel pretty good about them not getting blown out or anything by the Chiefs, so I think it's a pretty safe play there. The Falcons get to play the Giants. I know the Falcons just played a really fantastic game on defense against the Raiders this last week. They're doing everything. They're turning the ball over. They're getting sacks. They're blocking kicks. I feel pretty good about that against a really bad Giants offense. The Lions, this one's scary because the Lions defense is just so decimated, but they get to play the Bears. If you want to play the Lions defense, you could certainly consider doing that. The Cardinals get to play the Panthers this next week. I know the Panthers have been playing better, but the Cardinals have been okay on defense as well, so it's a pretty safe play if you want to go there. The Bengals, this is a big risky one here, but they play the Browns next week, whether it's Winston or if it's DTR. A lot of turnover opportunity. Not going to be a very good offense they're going against there, so you could certainly do that, but I would be horrified about it with Jameis Winston just because you could certainly get just absolutely torched by him. The Colts, they're a great option. They play the Titans this next week. Might be Mason Rudolph, might be Will Levis. I don't care. The Titans are going to turn the ball over a lot. The Colts are going to play pretty well on defense, I'm sure there. The Vikings, this is probably the #1 defense for next week. They get to play the Seahawks. The Seahawks might be without Geno Smith, and Sam Howell looked absolutely awful on Sunday night. I'd feel really, really good about the Vikings defense, although I bet they're not available. They were probably rostered this last week. The Bills get to play the Patriots. That doesn't really scare me. I'd feel pretty good about that matchup, even though they certainly gave up a lot of points this last week. Scary one, the Jaguars, they get to play the Raiders. If it's going to be Desmond Ridder again, the Raiders just don't scare me at all. I know the Jaguars are awful, but you've got a couple playmakers on that defense, and Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker. They at least have a decent pass rush. I'd feel okay about the Jaguars doing okay there. And the Packers, a great option to get to play the Saints offense. The Saints are not an offense that scares me, and the Packers are playing phenomenal football across the board right now. I'd feel pretty good about the Packers defense in my lineup next week. So that'll do it for the waiver wire this week. Up next, I'll be going over starts and sits. As always, I'll be splitting this into 2 videos, so I'll go over the first 8 games in part 1 of the video, the second set of 8 games. That one will be recorded Thursday night this week because I got to start traveling for the holidays on Friday, so they'll come out one day earlier, but I'll get you guys all the starts and sits, cover every single game this week. If you guys have any specific add or drop questions, just let me know in the comments below. If you want to make sure you don't miss those start-sit videos, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can certainly drop any start-sit questions there or in this video as well. I'm happy to answer whichever. Then, of course, if you made it this far in the video, just give it a thumbs up. It helps me out quite a bit and helps me know that I'm doing a good job. So, yeah, really appreciate you guys. Hopefully you guys made it to the semifinals with me, and let's just go through here. We got 2 weeks. Let's get some championships and sail into the sunset, guys. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.